Welcome to the inaugural Thinking podcast by Nootrobox. I'm your host, Geoffrey Wu, with my co-host, Michael Brandt.
Hello.
And the Thinking podcast is going to be all about nootropics, biohacking, and ways to optimize human performance. That's obvious given our background as biohackers, as leaders in the space of biohacking. But what I'm also very curious about is the thinking about thinking, the meta-thinking, right? If you look at great brands like Nike or Apple, I think, for example, Nike, they're all about honoring great athletics, great athletes. And for us at Nootrobox, what I think we think about all the time is, let's think about how to improve human thinking, human cognition. And we want to be honoring great thinkers, great thought leaders. And coming from a pretty rigorous and scientific approach. And how we predicate thinking about this podcast and about how we build Nootrobox is based on a system of 5 different axioms. We like to keep it rigorous and keep it pretty fundamental based. And for this episode of the podcast, we're going to talk about the first axiom of our system, which is the human as a system.
Yeah.
So what does that mean to you, Michael?
Well, in general, with a system, there's inputs into the system and there's outputs out of the system. Like, just in a very broad analogy, it's like McDonald's Funhouse. Like, there's all the slides that go in, and then like all the people shooting out of the tubes at the end. And you can think about a lot of things like systems, like the mail, like the USPS is a system, computer is a system. We're here talking about the human body as a system. There's things that come out, there's things that go in, there's things that happen. Some of it is very A, B, C, D predictable. Sometimes there's randomness. And then things come out.
Right. Yeah, I think when a lot of people think about humans or people, they think of people as emotional, unpredictable, and I think that's a very naive way to think about people, right? Like, we're no different from animals or, like the complex universe, right? Like, these are very complex systems as well, but there's baseline laws and observations we can use to predict an initial state to an end state. And a big part of biohacking is thinking about, hey, let's break down humans as not this unpredictable, emotional, weird creature, but something that we can like control the inputs and optimize for certain outputs.
I agree. I think that there is always the, hey, humans have free will, or like some personality, some magic that makes us humans rather than animals. But I would say that what that magic really is, the soul, the whatever, is actually an ability to look at ourselves as an animal and to be able to control, manipulate, adjust that, to be able to see yourself from the outside and to see what makes you you. And people have been doing this for all of history, like been attempting to see what makes them them,
right,
and then adjust it in some way. And then that is the human thing. Like, the one way I've heard it described is participant evolution. Other animals just evolve, but humans participate in their own evolution, and that's what makes us human. And that's why we're like, we pull away like no other. Maybe 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, we looked more like an ape, but now like we have the internet. Like, we're significantly more advanced because of that ability to look at our situation and make it better.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. It's like every other animal's initial state. If we think about a system, it's like let's talk about in a physical system, right? Like Newton's first 3 laws of mechanics, right? You have given like initial starting position and a vector for its velocity and acceleration, you can predict where it's going. And I think bringing it to human and biology, like every animal basically resets when they have a new generation, essentially, right? Like, there's some animals like monkeys that pass along notions of like tools and like hitting stones on nuts or something. I think what makes humans especially interesting is that we pass our initial state really, really well by like writing, by having records, and by teaching, right? And yeah, so again, like I think going to your notion about participant evolution, by like setting like new initial states that are better than before every single generation, like we're accelerating our growth rather than some like random natural selection, random process.
Yeah. So let's get into like that humans as a system thinking. Like, what is it? What were the things that you wanted to say about like humans as a system?
Yeah. So I think if we accept the notion that, hey, humans can be broken down into subsystems, well, we're both computer scientists. We both study computer science at Stanford, and one way to look at predicting to the future is looking at history. And I think we have a pretty good body of historical knowledge on computer systems, right? And if we break down what computers are, there's a set of hardware, like the CPU, the memory, the hard drive, and the software, like the programming, the applications built on top of it, right? So if we take this analogy, right, like, can we apply this thinking to humans? Like, what would that mean to you?
One question that pops in my mind right away is, like, people thought that they figured out this human system, like, you know, hundreds of years ago. Like, there was this guy, Semmelweis, who's a Hungarian doctor, and he was like a doctor in Austria, and he was the first guy to discover that washing your hands was like a way to keep things clean in a hospital. And the crazy thing about him is nobody believed him because it didn't make any sense in the system that they figured out, where there's like 4 ethers and you have different levels of these ethers, and anytime an individual gets sick, it's a very personalized thing to that person and their
like
ether
the
levels,
phlegm, the blood, like the different, and
so the idea that you would have to wash your hands, it just didn't make any sense. Like, he actually went to he got committed to an insane asylum eventually, and his stuff only made sense like 20-30 years after he died,
when there's germ theory.
Yeah,
right.
And so what I mean to say there is that there was that system of ethers where people thought they understood the inputs and the outputs, and this is when people were literally still bloodletting. Like you'd have a leach that would like
you have
pull
too much
something
blood
out.
in your system. You gotta let blood go out. Bad blood go out. Yeah.
And so that was a system, and people were probably thought that they understood it.
Yeah.
And so where are we now then?
No, that's a great
yeah.
question. I mean, I think there are a bunch of like medical or biological systems throughout history, right? Like Eastern medicine. I know for traditional Chinese medicine, there's like yin and yang and hotness and dampness and wind that are like, like the ethers of sort of traditional, I guess, Western medieval medicine. I think a large part of why we're different now is the scientific revolution, scientific method, right? We're constantly, disproving. It's almost like the cool thing about the scientific method is you're only ever proving things wrong. Right? You never are predefining truth because you can't prove something to be true, but you can prove something to be wrong. Right? It's like finding, like, you cannot prove there's no unicorns out in the universe, right? Like, we haven't explored every single corner of the universe, but like, we have not found a unicorn yet, right? Like the hypothesis of, So I think that the same thinking is applied to medical systems, right? Or biological systems, where I guess one of the best ways to test the validity of a system is the predictive power of a system, right? Like, Newton's laws of physics were super good at predicting like catapults.
It got us to the moon, actually.
Did it, or did it have some Einstein, general relativity? Well, relativity happened in the 30s, so probably they had, but like the speeds that the astronauts were flying were not near light speed or near super heavy gravitational pull, right? So they were probably doing like Newtonian approximations to get people to the moon. But and that was good enough. But like when they were like looking at black holes or looking at celestial objects, thousands of light years away, and with gravitational bending and stuff, like the formulas didn't work out as well, right? And that's where Einsteinian general relativity starts, predicting things better.
Yeah.
Right. And then the next level in physics is like quantum mechanics, right? When you go into super small distances with super high gravity, then like general relativity messes up.
And there's really interesting set with astronomy of systems that we've used.
Right.
Like, we were able to navigate really well with the Earth-centered universe understanding, but having good maps of the stars, like, our fundamental understanding was wrong, that like the universe revolves around the Earth. Right. But that still allowed us to, like, within that system, we were still able to sail ships around and track it with the stars.
Yep.
And it wasn't until later we figured out that, like, hey, we rotate around the sun, but you don't need to know that we rotate around the sun to know that, like, the North Star points north.
Right.
And so you can have assumptions
like
about the world.
Local assumptions. Make good enough local predictions where it's a good enough system.
And I think that's actually a really interesting distinction. Like, when we think about math, right? Math is a thing that we make up. You make up a set of axioms, and you say, hey, like, these are the rules of the system. This is Euclidean geometry, or this is calculus. Right. And then ideally, in a good math system is something, or a good system is something like physics, where it makes predictions about the real world.
Right.
And like
it's actually useful at that point.
Right.
Otherwise it's just like math land.
Yeah, it's math land. Yeah. So there's a lot of systems, and when you go to like fuzzier and fuzzier areas, like social sciences, there's not so much systems as there are like schools of thought or something, because it's hard to have just one main system. But with something like biology, it's like the body is a system, and we're actually figuring out what that looks like, the right models, the right mental.
Yeah, we're definitely predicting things better, right?
Yeah.
Like we can do surgery now. Like we know that, hey, the heart is not like where the soul is, where what the Egyptians thought, right? Like your brain is not just some like useless mass. It's actually where your cognition is, right? So like we are understanding science a lot better, right? Like Semmelweis, right? Like germ theory, like informed that, hey, people should be washing their hands before doing surgery or giving birth, right? Like, so by the fact that like I think mortality rates have gone down, it shows that like our understanding of biology and medicine is improving. And I think the next step, which I think we're very hard, and our team is working very hard on, is sort of the next paradigm shift in biological thinking, right? If you look up the definition of medicine, it's the diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of diseases. And diseases are basically humans in like a deficient state, right? So bring people from like not normal, deficient states to normal states. But I think what's super exciting and what's going to be enabled in the future is bring people from normal states to enhanced states. That's biohacking, that's smart drugs, that's like that's like evolution, participant evolution to like the next level.
And so why do we need to be systems, or why do we need to understand the human system in order for that to be possible?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, right? Like that's because we're approaching it from a scientific approach, right? Like if you don't have a systems thinking about a human, then there's no way for you to predict even the results, right? Like you're just flying blind if you don't have any rules governing why humans are acting or reacting in a certain way, right? If there's like no idea, like medicine, right? Like you give you like a painkiller, you have a good prediction of how it will affect you. You give me anti-cancer and antivirals, you have a good understanding of how that would affect my cancer or my cold, right? And again, those are affecting deficient states. And to do enhancement better, we need to have a good baseline understanding of enhancement, right? Like, given this certain blend of nootropics, I expect certain results in reaction time and memory.
Yeah. So what are some ways that you've looked at your system already and made improvements?
Yeah, no, I think that's I think we've all had personal experiences like, hey, our software, our personalities are evolvable, right? If you, going back to our analogy of humans as a computer system, well, our hardware is kind of like our DNA, our muscles, our bones, our and our, I guess, like our foods, what we consume. And our software is like our personality, like how we react to certain environmental inputs, like, oh, bright lights, so I freak out, or like loud noises.
So it's like the main things that touch the hardware layer at this point are like medical interventions. Like you broke a hip, or you're replacing your hip.
Right.
They get in the hardware layer, or you have a heart attack, they get into the hardware layer. But it's generally like you don't touch that unless it's like medical reasons.
Right.
I think there's a whole other conversation around like.
Well, there's also I think also people touch software from like a PTSD, like ADHD. Like,
oh yeah.
So it's like I think you touching both, but they're very medicinal, right? Very like therapeutic based.
Yeah. Whereas software is more approachable. Like people talk about changing their personalities more, so it's more like something that we're used to. Where we're used to have like improving yourself to be better.
I even think that like for the mainstream person, changing your personality seems crazy.
But like there's books like How to Think and Grow Rich, and so there's books that are 100 years old that tell people, hey,
like the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
Like any like philosopher from 2,000 years ago like is thinking about ways of altering human condition to be better.
I think we've had. I know that just in our conversations that we've both had like early experiences with the notion that, hey, we can manipulate and change our own personalities. I remember like I had a vivid memory of me in 5th grade, and I went to a small private school, and like every Friday we would like pledge allegiance to the flag, and then have like different like school-wide announcements, maybe like 20-30 kids a grade, and it was like elementary school, so like 150 people total. And I was supposed to make some sort of announcement over, some math tidbit or something, and I felt I for whatever reason I was like shy or just didn't want to do it, because I think I was pretty stubborn at the time. I'm still a stubborn person, but stubborn and shy. So I was like, no, I don't want to like make this announcement. And I had like a friend literally make whatever I was supposed to say for me, and I remember that as being kind of a weird moment, because I was like, why was I too shy to like make an announcement? And I want to. I don't want to be like that. I want to be someone who's like comfortable public speaking, and I think that set me off a path of like being in positions to be public speaking. I remember that like in our 5th grade graduation ceremony, like I like projected really loud. I was like pretty energetic, and people thought like I was like very happy to like graduate. Like my other classmates, I remember, were like crying or like really sad, and I was like just like this very like happy to be graduating loud speech. And I think that was like a very early sign to me of like, hey, like my personality is not fixed. Like if there's certain areas that I want to improve, I can like just dedicate like cycles and thinking, hey, I will practice this. I will put myself out there to improve.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of these areas of like true learning is like you're putting a new module into your brain in some way. I think like learning computer science is totally an example of that too, where when you start learning about, hey, like here's how you would decompose a problem and write different methods to solve different parts of it. Here's how you would iterate over something. Here's how you would sort something. Here's how different systems connect to each other. And once you start thinking about that, it's like you can never go back from it. You just have that new kind of module. You understand that way of thinking about the world. Or like for why I do stand-up comedy. I did a lot of stand-up comedy in college, as you know, and that too is like when you're getting good at that, it feels like you're installing some new like personality traits.
What drove you to do it?
Well, I wanted to just be funny. I thought that funny people have a really amazing control over the room. It's like Rasputin-like. Like if you can stand in front of a room and make people laugh, it's a cool thing to do. A, it's just like a nice thing. It's a gift that you're giving to everyone. And not everyone can give that gift. And B, like there is a sense of like power from it, where you're the snake charmer, right? Like you move this way, all the eyes follow you. You move that way, all the eyes follow you. If you're good at it, right? And that's, I just have a lot of respect for great stand-up comedians. I think that they're super smart. And
so you decided like, hey, I want to be good at this craft.
Yeah,
like
and then,
I will spend hours like thinking about this and making myself funny.
Yeah, and there's like a module that you feel like you're developing. It's like a new software that you're putting into your system, and then that's now part of your personality.
Right. Yeah, I think that I think we've all heard like tidbits. Like there's certain areas of personality. It's like fake it till you make it, right? Like put on this mask of you being like this gregarious, charming person, or put on this mask of being like a really dominant leader, and keep practicing it, faking it until like it becomes second nature, right? Like that's like been like a personal like tip for myself, right? Pretend I'm a video game character. I'm like controlling this Jeff Wu character, like going around in the world. So it's like there's a less personal ego tied to like the success of this character, Geoffrey Wu.
Yeah.
So I'm like just kind of like zooming out behind it, and then after you do it enough times, like, hey, like that was fine. Like if I fail at something, it's like not that bad. No one actually cares.
Right. So this is interesting. We're talking about all these aspects of personality, of this software layer of the human system, where you can kind of rewrite things. You can have different routines, different characteristics, and you can be in charge of that. And what we're talking about today in general is something even deeper, though. Is like not just software layer, but like hardware layer. And I think one thing that's interesting that we've been doing a lot is intermittent fasting. Like this idea of once a week fasting for 36 hours. And
today's actually a fast day. So every Tuesday, we have our last meal from Monday dinner, and we break fast together Wednesday morning. So that's a 36-hour fast.
And that's interesting, because in the short term, that's doing things like making you disciplined. It's making you focus. It's making you like stay on the work, rather realizing the relationship that you have with food and how you might go take breaks, not because you're hungry, but to procrastinate. It has all these kind of short-term software benefits on your
Right.
personality. It makes you a more disciplined person. They're not short term, actually. I think that if you keep doing it, it's long term. But it also has hardware effects, right?
Yep.
Because it lets your gut microbes relax.
Insulin sensitivity goes up. Different genes that correlate with longevity, like CERT1, CERT2 are upregulated, so they're expressed more. Yeah, like a lot of these health benefits, like your blood pressure goes down, your heart rate goes down. Yeah, that's like hardware manipulation, right? That's like imagining like, hey, you do this like regimen to your computer, and then like its CPU goes faster.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you remember like defragmenting your hard drive back in the day, like your your hard drive stores data in all these spots, like wherever's quickest to write the data to. But then when you want to read data, that's not necessarily optimal for reading data. So you can have your computer do a job.
That's actually a great analogy.
You have your computer do a job where it it puts information bits that are commonly needed together, like things that are part of the same file. It puts them on the same physical part of the disk. And it's just a job that you can run on like a weekly basis. This is like back in the day. I think computers do this more automatically now, or they're smarter.
Right.
But like Windows 95, like if you wanted your computer to run faster,
I remember doing defrag.
You defrag, and so it's this thing that you run that makes it better, or like updating your firmware or something. It's like this job.
Right. You do a little pause in the day, right? Like it's like when you're defragging, you're not like installing new stuff, right? Like it's definitely a pretty heavy process. But then the week, like the 7 days afterwards, like your system runs much faster, right? It's like kind of like, that's a funny way to put it. Like intermittent fasting is like the way to defrag your own personal human hardware.
Right. And we're obviously super into nootropics, like eating something that affects your hardware that makes you better at just fundamental physiological things like reaction time and short-term working memory. And why do we do that? Well, it's because I want to be a better learner. I want to be better at the work that I do. I want to be able to focus for longer, which kind of touches onto like the software layer. Like I've done a lot of software types of things to be better at sitting and focusing and learning and taking critique and getting better at the things I do. I've done a lot of like software things.
Right.
And what was really interesting to me about nootropics, like years ago, first getting into it, was it was just deeper. It's not just like, hey, read a book and think about the world differently, but it's like, no, like actually affect your hardware in a way that enhances your system.
Yep. Improve your CPU, right?
Right.
Like instead of 1 gigahertz processor, get a 1.2 gigahertz CPU.
Right, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think that there's also companies coming from the other direction, where they're coming, like 23andMe, that they can tell you your genome. You send them a like saliva cheek swab, and they take your cheek cells and give you your DNA from it. They're kind of coming from the bottom, where they're saying, hey, here's like the fundamental building blocks of a Geoffrey.
Well, I would say that we're thinking about it holistically, right? Like if there are gurus, or like these people, like these, Tony Robbins, motivation coaches, are telling you like, hey, like positive thinking. And then there's like fundamental, like, medicine-based companies, like biotech-based companies coming from the bottom up, like, hey, this is your raw data and not very actionable, right? Like I haven't been able to do really anything with my 23andMe data. I think we're thinking about it from a holistic standpoint, right? Like we can optimize ourselves, and we can optimize through the whole stack of what it means to be a human, right? From our personality, from our software layer, all the way down to our hardware. And that's, I think, why we're excited about like the genetic part of the equation, right? Because, we're touching our hardware with consumables, but the next level deeper is like personalizing based on your genetics, right? Like what it has been actionable for me from 23andMe or other genetic SNP services have been, hey, like I'm a person with like a slow caffeine metabolizer, right?
Yeah.
And you might be a fast one. So like caffeine stays in my system longer than someone else.
Right.
So it stands to reason that, hey, like my cup of coffee or my Go Cube, right, should have different ratios of caffeine to other nootropics.
Yeah. Or being like a higher low producer of vitamin D,
Right.
or having like natural bone strength that's higher or lower. There's all these things might affect what you want to take.
Right.
One thing that pops into my mind when I think about like human body as a system and nootropics and fasting and stuff is that we have these like set inputs, like our senses. We have our mouth, we have our ears, like we have our eyes, and all the information we take from the world is through these senses, right? When we're learning, it's through our eyes and our ears. When we're eating, it's through our mouth. And one thing that's funny to me is it's kind of arbitrary. Like, what if there's a new input in the future? What if there's like a new way into the system? Because this is stuff that like we share in common with monkeys. Do you think in the future that we'll have like some new, better input? Like, you remember in the Matrix, there was like the thing that like
bolts right into your spine.
Bolts into your spine. Like, that's cool sci-fi. And I wonder other things earlier. Like, actually, like, you know, people take IVs when they're sick.
Right.
You never take an IV when you're healthy. Maybe if you're like a super professional athlete, you would. I don't know. But
or when you're hungover.
Or you're hungover, yeah. But maybe people, I don't know, if there was a way of doing it actually whenever anyone is hungover, right? Like, most people when they're hungover don't have just an IV and like do the thing. Like,
right.
But maybe if you had like input that was super easy to clip an IV into and it was painless, you just like put an IV in there and then you're hydrated. I think like, that'd be really cool, right?
I think that opens up an interesting question, right? Like, if we extrapolate out the humans as a system analogy, then yes, there will be new input methods into the human body, right? Like, I think we have fundamentally long science and technology, and yeah, why can't there be like nanobots that you inject into your bloodstream and they like release, they like attach directly to your neurons and start inputting new, like a new input-output system directly into your brain, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, yeah, why can't a matrix-like future exist where like, yeah, you install memories? What is a memory? Well, it's not super well understood, but like the hypotheses are like the connections between different neurons, their axons in different patterns, right? Tend to store like how memories are stored.
Yeah.
Can we like manipulate them in a way with like nanobots or, you know, some sort of manipulation to like put them in new configurations to give you new memories?
But there might be,
right? It seems like it's physically possible.
Yeah.
We can't do it yet, but it's physically like, from a physics perspective, you can move atoms around to make that configuration happen.
Right, and I think another way to think about it that's maybe more organized than just like nanobots or an injection is like a subsystem. Like, your eye is a subsystem of your body. You could imagine like a hardware subsystem that like does something, and maybe it's like it's got some degree of autonomy to it, where it's like,
that's interesting. Yeah, like what if like you replace your disk drive with like a solid state drive, right? It's a lot faster, more efficient, you know, hard disk, right?
Yeah.
It's like plug in a new eye with like new inputs. New
senses. Or plug something in that like can regulate something about your body in ways. You know, it's interesting as we're talking about this, because there's actually a lot of things that have touched on the human system, like for instance, eyeglasses are interesting. I think like being transsexual is interesting. I think that birth control is interesting, or the like an IUD that prevents you from getting pregnant. These are all interesting. Like, you're manipulating human hardware. Yeah, and a lot of times these are the progress has been very slow to say, hey, like, you're a system and you want to change it, and 99% of the time it's because you're ill in some way. You had a heart attack, or we're installing a stent, or like you broke your leg, we're fixing your leg. And then there's these things like on the edge, like plastic surgery, birth control, whatever, like that, like affect your system in some meaningful way, in a way that's like accepted. But I think what's happening is the price of that's going down. I think that the price of potential other things that you would install is going down. I think in general, people are excited at the notion of optimizing their hardware. And
it seems almost reasonable when you put it that way, right? Like, if you put it that way, we're already manipulating our hardware.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah, birth control, you know, sexual, gender reassignment, like those are very like intimate, ways to manipulate our bodies. So it's like very much stands to reason that, hey, we can manipulate our brain and our cognition in positive ways as well.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that was like a great deep discussion into, the axiom of humans as a system. And, we'll do this every week. And we have 4 more other axioms that we love to, deep dive into and share our thoughts and our thinking. And yeah, looking forward to getting your feedback and your suggestions of how we should improve and bring on certain guests. Any last thoughts from you?
Yeah, no, we have a lot more to say. Just excited for the next one.
Yeah, cool. All right, thanks.